Dan Heng Per Curate is finally rerunning for the first time ever since he was given out for free from his release up to version 4.0. So let's take a dive into his viability in the current meta. If you somehow didn't get him for free, now would be a good time to pick him up. I'll not go into his kit or eidolons as all of that information is readily available within the game, and your average player would rather go for DPS and support eidolons over his own, unless you really like him, of course. Dan Heng is a physical preservation character that is currently ranked T0 in both Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow, and T0 in Pure Fiction. Don't really have any strong opinions on this assessment, but I do agree he is the best shielder in the game by a long shot. The value he provides is just much higher than Aventuring, the second best shielder in this case. Since the fastest clears tend to go sustainless, he sees very little play in these clears. But that doesn't mean he's useless or bad. He's still a top tier sustain, and you do need sustains if you want to comfortably clear the endgame. For most people who only care about clearing the endgame, sustainless is not the way to go, and Dan Heng PT is definitely one of the best sustains in the game as it stands right now. Let's talk about what teams he can work in. So Dan Heng PT is primarily an attack buffer and a shielder, which means he works on any team that is attack scaling, and has a particularly decent synergy with Sunday, as his dragon is buffed by Sunday, I believe. The only real teams he doesn't work on are HP scaling teams. On Astral Blade teams, he could be detrimental with Blade, but his signature Lightcone can mediate this effect, which I'll talk about later. When he works on any attack scaling teams, this means he can work for dot and break teams as well. You just need to tweak him a little bit for him to work well on these teams. You can also play him as a hypercarry main DPS, but this is only really viable if you have his E2 or more, since it allows him to keep Soul Dragon uptime longer. Typically, in this case, his best supports would be Siren and really any other two supports depending on the endgame mode or boss, but Sunday is usually a very solid option because of the synergy. This isn't a major concern if you don't plan to play him as a DPS anyways. Taking a look at his Lightcone options, his best in slot is obviously his signature, the Worlds Apart, which increases his own attack, increasing his own buffs, and strengthening his own shields. This Lightcone also heals, which means it can work with more Nax Blade, though he would still struggle with some uptime. His other options would be the Battle Pass Lightcone, Journey, Forever Peaceful, which buffs team-wide damage, or else you can use any off-path Lightcone with the highest base attack possible. If you're playing him in Dot, you can actually use Japart's Lightcone, Moment of Victory, since it increases effect hit rate, providing some synergy. Let's talk about his relic sets. If you're playing him normally, he would typically use the 4-piece Self-Shrouded Recluse, as it increases shield effect by 22% and team-wide crit damage by 15%. And he would also typically use the 2-piece Ushaka Planar Orb, which offers 12% attack to the first character and 5% ER on the wearer. If you're playing him on a break team, you can go either 2-piece Break Effect and 2-piece Recluse. The 4-piece effect is useless in this case, so it's better to just mix and match. You can even use the 4-piece Iron Cavalry set in this case, but you might sacrifice too much attack, so I wouldn't go for it intentionally unless you have pieces lying around. If you're playing him in follow-up teams, you can technically have him on a 2-piece City of Converging Stars. Do note that this set does not stack, so if your Ashrail is already holding this set, you can just keep Dan Heng on Lushaka. Technically, if used with any hyper carry, he can also be used on a Sacerdotal set. This requires him to skill every 2 turns though. Honestly, if you're already min-maxing like that, it's probably better to just go sustainless at that point. Of course, he can also use any other generic buffing planar sets. If you're using him on Elation teams, Broken Keel might be better since Silver Wolf scales off speed instead of attack or damage percent, so Broken Keel is the only planar that would actually block her damage in that case. As he is an attack scaler, the only stat he cares about are attack and speed. This means main stats would be Speed Boots, Attack Body, Attack Orb, and ER Rope. You want ER Rope for constant ult uptime. The only exception is if you're using him with Phynon, then in that case, Attack Rope would probably be better because Phynon would just be in his ult state majority of the time, so you want more buffs in that case. 134 speed is enough, but ideally you reach 160 speed or really just as fast as you can. I want to briefly mention his DPS build as well if you somehow care. This is really only applicable at E2, but I suppose you can also try and force it to work below that. His Lightcone options are still pretty much the same, it doesn't change. His S1 is preferred because it allows more Nax Blade to be used with him. So the set you want him on would be the 4-piece Ash Blazing Duke set, or alternatively you can run him on the Poet set. but you need to keep him below 95 speed in that case. His planar set would just be the 2-piece banana amusement set. Unlike his normal build, the stats he wants are a bit different. The main stats would be attack or speed boots as you see fit, crit rate or crit damage body, attack orb, and attack rope. You still want attack and speed, but just enough to hit your desired breakpoints. However, this time you want actual crit rate and crit damage. The amount of crit rate you need will depend on your team comp, because for example Sunday gives 20% crit rate, but you might not necessarily run him with Sunday, so just try to hit your desired crit rate and as much crit damage as possible. Attack rope is better in this case for more damage, and you would typically have enough Soul Dragon uptime, assuming E2, so ERR rope isn't as necessary. Dan Heng PT is still the best shielder in the game as it stands right now, providing a strong shield and some attack buffs. He is also SP positive, making it more comfortable for you to play the game. Besides HP scaling teams, he can function as a sustain for practically any team comp. That's kinda the gist. I hope you found this video helpful on how to properly play and build Dan Heng PT, which teams to use him on, and if he is still worth your time. As always, if you found this video helpful or entertaining, please like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me, so I can continue making more Star Rail related content in the future.